Hello friends, welcome to episode 115 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level, I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
And we are running on a generator right now.
We are running on a generator right now.
So, before I left to come over here, I said those magical words. I said, hey Google, is it going to rain today? And it was like, probably not.
Yeah.
There's a very small chance of it. And then I heard a peal of thunder.
Yeah.
And I walked up to my car, and the sky was gloomy, and I was like, are you sure about that, Google? Mm-hmm. And I got in my car, started driving, got basically to the next major road over. It starts pouring. Mm-hmm. I get to your driveway. It has stopped pouring. Mm-hmm. It's dry.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, maybe it's just a tiny little piece of popcorn in the middle of the sky.
Yep.
I get inside. It now starts pouring at your place.
Mm-hmm.
We're basically just past our hellos, and the power goes out.
Yep.
Then it comes back.
And then it goes out.
And
then it comes back really briefly, and then it goes out. And now it's out. So we have a generator running, so thank goodness for modern technology. Yeah, I mean, technically I could run everything here on battery backup, but the beeps alone would probably drive our entire listenership insane.
That's no way to go.
So here we are, and prepared and ready, and we have a show to do. Because as long as our generators hold out and the Empire doesn't take them from us, we should be able to get through this podcast.
We are but small moisture farmers, please.
There's a lot of moisture outside. Oh, God, there's a lot of moisture outside.
Yeah,
it's like 90% humidity.
Humid, too, man. Oh.
Yeah.
So we are here tonight to talk about the Star Wars RPG.
Yeah, it's our show spotlight, our system spotlight week, and Star Wars is our thing. Now, there are multiple versions of Star Wars.
Yeah, that was the
RPG.
The first thing that came up when we were like, let's cover Star Wars was which one?
Well, let's start at the beginning. I'm gonna take us all back to 1977.
Oh,
when
2 years before I was born.
Yeah, when A New Hope was released into theaters. It was incredible. Nobody expected how big it would really get, and it was 100% a space opera. Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about space opera, we'll get more into this, but effectively we're talking about a fantasy story that is dramatic with heroes, and we had heroes in it that were larger than life, and these unbelievable battles, and this galactic scale existence. And it impressed everyone. And so it's been going for a long time and changed hands and canon shifted and things have happened. But it has not stopped. It's nearly
faded into obscurity. Almost nobody knows what Star Wars is nowadays.
Yeah, except for Disney, who owns the hell out of it. And has been producing new stuff like The Mandalorian, which, again, is a totally different feel on the same space opera. It's almost spaghetti western, which is funny because that's a horse opera.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. Like nothing has changed about the core of it, and that's the key.
Yeah.
But what's funny is it took 10 years before the first RPG of it hit. And that's mostly because of the timing of what was going on with games at that time. And what's even funnier was the only reason why West End even had a system to work with is because they originally had started building a system for Ghostbusters.
Yeah, that was a wild thing I did not expect when digging up the history for this. Was the Ghostbusters RPG?
Yeah, so
what we have to thank for the
we have a lot to thank for the Ghostbusters RPG, which is funny. Like that kicked off so much. So in 1987, so between 1987 and 1999. West End Games had the rights to it, and they had a D6 game that was based on that Ghostbusters system. And what's funny is that system created what we now know as dice pools. That was the birth generation. That was Jonathan Tweet, who built the Over the Edge system, and Mark Reinhagen, who was Vampire the Masquerade World of Darkness. So if you know those systems, or have played in those, you know the dice pool methodology that came out of that. And that's really what birthed all of that. So we have to thank Ghostbusters, not Star Wars, but Ghostbusters for all of that.
Now, for those of you in the audience who don't know what a dice pool is, a dice pool is when you have like a skill or an attribute or something that says you have 4 points in stealth, meaning you will take 4 of a specific type of die and roll all of those. rather than adding that number as a modifier to a single die or something like that.
Yes. Now, what's even better is, but just between 87 and 1999, which sounds like a long time, it was a decently long time.
Mm-hmm.
There were 140 source books and supplements and adventures.
Oh, is that all?
Another 15 issues of a magazine that came along with it. That was like an adventure magazine that was between 94 and 98.
Uh-huh.
So one of the largest breadths of books. So it created effectively its own canon. What's interesting is that Lucas had considered West End Games source books so authoritative that Timothy Zahn was hired to write what became the Thrawn trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
So it is as canon can be for that time period.
Yep.
And because of that, a lot of people looked back to those games and those source books and all of that as canon. And then West End had basically went into bankruptcy in 1998 and lost rights to it through the bankruptcy, and that wasn't picked up until 2010 by Wizards of the Coast. So 2 years it went into obscurity, got picked up by Wizards of the Coast, and Wizards of the Coast ran with
12 years.
12. I'm sorry, 12 years. You're right.
Oh wait, hold on a second.
Yeah, 98
held,
to
so
10.
held until 2010. Okay,
Correct.
yeah. So lost in 1998, picked up in 2000.
Yes,
that's what it was. Okay.
So we then have Wizards of the Coast picked it up along with everything else they were doing, and this was during the 2000 era of D20.
Open gaming license, the OGL craze, where everybody had their own D20 games coming out based off of the 3 and 3.5 Player's Handbook.
Yep. And then there was, during this, they had a whole bunch of beta things that went on as well, which was big at that time. So there was an original and a revised edition with 18 source books. They then did the second edition, which was the Saga edition, which went with another 14 source books. And in 2010, they said they weren't going to renew the license on it. And it dropped at that point.
So this is actually the only edition I played.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. This is the one I played.
And I want to say it was probably the first version of the original D20 version.
Yes.
I don't think it was I don't think it got as far as the Saga rules or anything like that.
Right.
I was fresh out of college and had a handful of friends who were like super huge Star Wars nerds, and I only played it a little bit, but I remember it. It felt like D&D in space.
That's basically what it was
with the D20 rules.
Yeah,
so
I mean the Saga edition actually leaned into miniatures even more, so it got more tactical.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that then kind of pushed its own thing. The miniatures and card games kind of started in that time period, but we're going to focus on just the role playing game because there's a whole TIE miniature combat thing that happened. At various scales, but I'm kind of lean away from that and focus on when Fantasy Flight picked it up in 2012. Now, Fantasy Flight created effectively 3 different standalone games that all used the same rule system. Mm-hmm. They had little minor mechanics adjustments, but really they were all add-ons. They were things you could shift between the 3 of them easily.
Yeah, I remember seeing that at the our FLGS, our friendly local game store, and thinking like maybe I want to pick that up, especially in preparation for this particular system spotlight, and looking at the 3 separate box sets and going, I don't know which one what is this?
Yeah, and what's interesting is a lot of the game stores, when they got those, didn't know what to do with them, but then got very quickly educated on that they were just settings. That's all they were.
Yeah.
So effectively, imagine if D&D had released a Neverwinter box set, a Faerun box set, and a generic box set.
Right.
And it was, how do you want to play? Mm-hmm. Do you want to play in Forgotten Realms? Do you want to play in Faerun? Do you want to play in whatever?
Forgotten Realms is Faerun. Well,
General Faerun versus the, 10 towns regions, shall we say.
The Sword Coast.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking like old Faerun. Let's see... Well, I won't even get into it.
You're going to get all game snobby on there.
I was going to try. My brain was like, let's see, how far back do we want to go? And then I just like, no.
You don't.
So, I mean, I guess you could have also they could have done like a Dragonlance edition, which would have been really cool.
Yeah.
Anywho, so we had Edge of Empire, which was basically shortly after the destruction of the first Death Star.
Okay.
Okay, so right after New
Right
Hope.
after the first movie.
Right after New Hope. You had Age of Rebellion, which was basically The Empire Strikes Back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, literally follows up. And then Force and Destiny, which was just after the destruction of the first Death Star and Obi-Wan Kenobi, because so it kind of follows into the same thing, but the difference is that each one of these book sets basically follow a different career set, I guess you could say, of people.
Okay.
So you've got Edge of the Empire, which was smugglers and bounty hunters and outlaws on the frontiers. So
played probably a lot like The Mandalorian does.
Yeah, you'd feel it definitely that way. Age of Rebellion was rebel soldiers, freedom fighters, very galactic.
Yes.
So this is your TIE, your X-wing, your ship against ship kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then Force and Destiny, as it sounds, is the whole Jedi Order scale.
Right.
Okay, and Jedi sensitive people and feeling out the Jedi Knights. Now, there were 2 additional additive books that were kind of thrown in there, which was Force Awakens, which were the events prior to the third Star Wars trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then Rise of the Separatists, which was during the Clone Wars. So It gave you a full breadth of all of basically the movies, without a doubt. And all of these used a new pool system. A completely different system than the other 2, but kind of made its own tweaks. Now, when it first came out, there was a lot of negativity initially hit by it.
I bet.
People didn't like the way that it was being put out, and in the initial testing, it really didn't play well. But what was interesting was that everyone who was adept at looking at a game system and knowing other systems besides D&D. Mm-hmm. Took a second look at it, started playing with it, and realized that it was a completely different way of using the dice to create fate and situations, which we see more commonly today. Like, we have games that involve a fate die or a luck die, mm-hmm. or inspiration dice that add bonuses to give to the players.
But that's basically all this dice system is.
Yeah, all it is that you've got a base set of dice, mm-hmm. which give you a very limited breadth of how far and how many effective add-ons. So effectively, instead of having a whole series of dice that you roll and, mm-hmm. and dealing with a whole gambit of add-ons, that can do things, it's a much simpler design, almost, I would say, akin to some of the basic game systems, where you have, here's your 3 dice. You a maximum of 3 dice that you can play with, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, you've got something that'll benefit. We're going to exchange one of those dice for a higher value die.
Yeah.
So now you've got 2 dice of one value. In this case, I think it's
D8s.
You have D8s, yeah. And then now you have a different die that's a D10,
12.
A D12.
Goes up to D12.
Yeah. And then, do you have something else? So take another one of those D8s and swap it out for D12. Mm-hmm. So effectively, your chances of getting higher numbers goes up because you now have the option for those.
Right.
But the odds are better in your favor. And the dice themselves are not standard numerical dice either.
Right. I would say it's definitely the most intimidating thing about the game system, and I think it's honestly the dice system itself is really, I think, where the main focus of the entire system spotlight is, because it's where all the rules fall. It's where all the adjudication gets done and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also the first thing you probably notice about the game. I mean, we can talk all day about other game systems, and they handle numbers this way, or they handle attributes this other way, or something like that. But when doing any sort of research on Fantasy Flight's Star Wars, you see this handful of multicolored, multifaceted dice.
Yeah,
and there's not a number to be seen.
Nope.
None of them have numbers on them, and I remember prepping for this show initially and going, okay, I got to do some research on this so I can talk about it intelligibly. Opening up this thing going, what the hell is this? How am I supposed to sort through it? And it definitely has a logic to it. Like, I think as a storyteller, as an experienced person who understands game systems, I was telling you this at that dinner, I think, I would be able to run this pretty smoothly after a game session or 2. knowing what dice to use, what dice to add in, which dice to exchange for other dice and such like that.
Right.
But I just, to me, I really feel like it's a double-edged sword. It adds a lot of complexity. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Legend of the Five Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Another Fantasy Flight property. So,
right.
That makes a lot of sense that they would use some very similar mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And the dice give you a lot more outcomes than just success or failure. Very much
Correct.
like Legend of the Five Rings dice system.
Yep.
You've got that other secondary axis of advantages or complications that get thrown in. So you can succeed with complication, or you could fail but open an opportunity for, maybe somebody else to succeed.
Correct.
Or something like that. And that adds a really great realm of complexity to how you adjudicate die rolls as a storyteller.
Yeah.
Because it allows for a lot more complex things than you win or you lose.
Well, and the other thing about it is it's no longer a hidden die set behind a screen that the DM's rolling going, oh man, bad things happened. Or the player just failing in front of them, I didn't succeed, what happens? It's, I didn't succeed, but I have this exception that happened.
Yeah.
So I didn't succeed, but something good will still come of this, and something terrible. Oh no.
Yeah.
And so now the players are they're looking at they know what happened.
2 threats, but a triumph?
Yeah. So like how do we move through this?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think in that sense, it puts the drama right back on the table. And kind of gives the narrator a chance to stare at it and go, all right, well, here's what happens. Or even the players to go, oh, well, I guess I just fell. I didn't make the catch, so did I just fall? Like, I think the dice in the, epicness of it explains much of what happens in the stories.
Yes.
Luke falling but not dying, getting caught on the antenna in Cloud City. The majestic moment of the Force connecting with him in New Hope, and him being able to take out the Death Star. Leia coming upon, a Ewok, and it being, friendly to her. Little things like that where you're like, your character's lost, but you come across a fuzzy little creature who seems friendly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so there's a local tribe of tiny bears, and so those kinds of events now are on the table again.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I like I said, I see the potential of it as a storyteller, and frankly, now that I kind of understand how the dice system works in general, I'm excited by it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I kind of look at it and go, I'm switching my game over to Savage Worlds right now, and I'm very immersed in a very low, rules light, mechanics light system, and I look at something like this, and I'm like, this adds a lot of complexity in how you can tell your stories.
Yeah,
but you're going to have at least one player at your table 3 years into your game scratching his head, going, I still don't know what the hell to roll here.
But you have that in D&D.
But you
have that
do.
in almost every system.
You do.
And in some systems where it's more esoteric, it's even worse. Like, I can remember playing, White Wolf once a month and just having to dig back through the books to remember what all my powers did.
Yeah.
It was never an easy task by looking at the sheets, but, at the same time, D&D gives you the same problem with commander abilities. Or any number of other things. You have to have a digital resource. Yeah, spell list. I mean,
every spell in that book is a rule.
Yeah, is a custom rule that can be extended or enhanced or any number of other things by other abilities. So it's just a stack on stack. So as much as this system is dice narrative, I think you'd run the same risks that you run any other system that has complexities.
That's I suppose fair.
So.
I suppose that's fair. So what are we talking about with these dice? You want to get in the particulars of it, or
I kind of don't.
Because
I don't feel that I think saying enough about them that the dice pools happen a certain way, and that the rolls are meaningful in the sense that you not only have your success or failure state, where you succeed or don't succeed, but you also have other things. For instance, there's the you have green advantage dice, yellow proficiency dice, boost dice, difficulty dice, challenge dice, setback dice, and then destiny tokens, which we'll get to later.
Yeah.
Just let's start up the Benny tokens. That's what they are.
Bennies.
They're Benny tokens. Or woe tokens, but we won't really. Well, it's woe in a different way.
Yeah.
It's destiny for you. It's woe from the storyteller's perspective. And I totally feel that those are drama dice. I don't care what they say about those tokens.
Okay,
That's what they are.
Fair enough.
Because you spend it, it goes to the DM. They spend it, it goes to you. That's how those games get played.
Yep.
And I like that. I've always liked that trade back and forth because you can see just how messed you are when you watch all the stuff flip, and go to dark in front of you. So you have these green advantage dice, which are effectively the normal dice that you roll for any challenge that you're going to do.
Yeah.
Those can then get upgraded by your proficiency in something.
Right.
Whether you have a skill in it, whether you have something that bonuses it. So it exchanges those green dice for yellow dice, making them effectively better.
Right. So you're going to take basically your D8 dice, and you're going to upgrade those to the D12 dice.
The yellow D12s.
Giving you more ability to roll better stuff.
Yeah. It also adds...
Well, can't even say higher numbers because there's not even numbers.
No, you have a better chance of success. But also a chance for advantages, other things.
So then you've got your boost dice, which like if somebody's helping you,
correct,
would not give you skill or proficiency, but it might give you so these are D6 that you're going to throw into your dice pool.
Right.
But then, so like I'm trying to sneak past a stormtrooper, right? Okay, so maybe I've got 3 in, agility, okay? And then I've got 1 in stealth.
Yep.
Okay, stealth is a proficiency, so I'm going to start with my 3d8 for my agility.
Yep.
I'm going to swap out one of those for a d12 because I've got 1 in stealth.
So you're now 2d8, 1d12.
1d12.
As a pool.
Rather than trying to roll, like having the stormtrooper that I'm trying to sneak past roll his own dice or anything like that,
right,
his abilities are going to get thrown into my die pool as negative dice.
Correct.
So if he's got like a 2 in cunning and a 1 in, I don't know, notice. I don't know what the actual names of the skills are and something like that in there. I'm going to take 2 of the bad D8s and 1 of the bad D12s.
Your difficulty and challenge.
And throw those in there.
Correct.
And what those will do is when they roll their own
value,
threats, or disadvantage, or whatever the names of the symbols are, those are going to wash out any successes I make. And then we're going to take the net of what
the net positive.
The net positive of any category.
Correct.
So successes and failures wash each other out. So if I roll 2 successes, he rolls 1 success. Then his 1 success cancels out one of mine. I end up with 1.
You succeed.
Then there are threats and
triumphs?
Advantages. Threats and advantages.
Correct.
Okay. Those cancel each other out.
But
and then there are triumphs and despairs.
Which are effectively like crits.
And those cancel each other out.
Correct. But you could fail and have a triumph. So that means that even though you didn't accomplish the thing that you were looking to do, you still had something epic happen in a good way, something that would benefit you and your group. Maybe you weren't able to lasso around the at walker when you were doing your swing shot, and flying around it on Hoth. You missed your shot, the cable snapped. But it puts you in a perfect position for your next shot.
Yeah.
So now you'll get an advantage on your next shot. It gave you an extra swing around it. He's out of position and have misfired.
You turn the corner and you walk directly into a stormtrooper. The bad news is you failed your stealth. You have been detected. Yeah. The good news is he's just as shocked to see you.
Yep.
And you caught him flat-footed. You get initiative immediately next turn. Yep. You get a surprise attack on him.
Exactly. It's the Han Solo chasing down the stormtroopers, and then the woe on that would be you do chase the guys down, but you just chased them into a training room where there's 40 more.
Good job, you caught him.
Yeah. So that's the game is always pushing the narrative. The dice are pushing the narrative, which is something that you don't often see. You don't see that in the way that play usually comes out. And the other thing about the game is that it doesn't always require you to do a comparative roll.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, this is a Stormtrooper, so there's going to be one difficulty die involved and one challenge die.
Sure.
So you can get it really simple.
Mm-hmm.
Some other things that are in the rules are also some of the bad guy rules of you have your basically your foot troops who are pointless. They're not going to kill anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your henchmen and your villainy. And what they can do as well, and what their ranking is, and how that is taught is not unlike 7C, in the way that it's meant to be epic. So it isn't until you get to that villainy, that true villain that's behind the scenes doing all the things, or even their henchmen. You could call Boba Fett a henchman.
Sure.
Where you're at in it, working for someone, those are the people who are going to do terrible things, that are going to cause problems, and make changes and kill and do things like that. So that's the difference in there, is that everything is meant to keep the story moving faster forward and make these scenes feel dramatic and epic and moving, which I love. It's cinematic. This is an exceptionally cinematic game. Yeah. Exceptionally. And it's meant to lean into that. What's interesting is I pulled a couple pieces from the past. Funny enough, Game Informer and Penny Arcade. Game Informer, when this came out, in practice, the system offers tremendous flexibility to allow the players to participate in the storytelling process. I agree. Rather than just wait for the GM to respond after a die roll. The players talk together about how to interpret the roll of the dice and shape the results to make the most exciting story. It also speaks strongly to the cinematic nature of the Star Wars universe. Characters in the movie often succeed or fail along with potent side effects.
Yep.
And I completely agree with that. I think this system leans hard into that and makes it. It even has, with the Destiny tokens, the ability to do dramatic writing.
Dramatic editing, yeah.
You can grab a Destiny token if you've got it and say, actually, I did pack an L4, explosives kit. And so we're going to be able to blow the door. Great. But he does have a thermal detonator. And that is literally what those are meant for. And I think that's fantastic.
I almost just did the voice.
Yes. Exactly. And so
I don't know what language that is, but I know that means I'm going to blow this whole place sky high.
So I think as far as the dice go, it's about as far as I want to lean into those. But I do want to really get into what makes Star Wars different as an RPG. Because it is the same and yet different. Because everybody looks at it as, oh, it's sci-fi, it's space. Yeah, all that is true. 100% true. But it's cinematic, it's heroic space opera.
It's not sci-fi at all.
It's fantasy.
Like, just because it takes place in space does not mean it's sci-fi. Like it's very space fantasy. There's no sci in it at all. No, there's no sci in it. There's right down to there being sound in space. What sound does a TIE fighter make? If you said any at all, it's not sci-fi.
And you can launch from the ground to space.
Yeah.
With very little effort, as if gravity doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah, they were in the belly of a giant space worm that lived inside of an atmosphereless asteroid.
Sure.
And it had an atmosphere on the inside. They didn't immediately decompress the moment they got out.
There's something that could be said about that, but, it's...
Just saying.
Yeah. It's space opera.
Yeah, it's space opera.
As much as Star Trek is space opera.
Star Trek is soft sci-fi.
Sometimes you get sucked out, sometimes you don't. Every planet has the same...
It's soft sci-fi.
It is exceptionally soft.
Exceptionally soft sci-fi, but it is... I wouldn't...
Please tell me what a deflector shield really is made of and does.
I can tell you what it does. I don't know
everything.
What it's made
of. It does everything.
Okay, it does everything, but its primary purpose is to stop every last little piece of space debris from ripping holes in your ship when you're going to warp 3.
100% agree with that, on top of the electroplating and shields.
Okay. All right. I see which side of the Star Wars, Star Trek, fight you
I love both differently.
No, clearly
I love both differently.
It's fine.
But anyways,
it's fine, Rob. It's fine.
This is gonna be a thing.
No, it's fine.
I can feel this.
It's fine.
So, the timeline that they have just for Star Wars is 25,000 years prior to the Battle of Yavin, up to, I love this, 35 years after.
Oh, okay.
Now, canon can go a little beyond that, and there's definitely stuff beyond that. But what's funny is how many times it goes back again and again. We always like filling in the history of this. Because there's a lot of history in the canon, and I think that's always intriguing. That this is one of those games that one of those canonic story and campaign settings, if you will, in a galactic world where going back becomes the trope. Like, what happened before this? Oh, it must be this. Oh, what happened before that? It must be this. Well, where did this person come from? Well, they came from here, which had this. And it's all about stepping further and further back in the story. And it isn't until recently, really, that we've started to move forward. And that's when problems really come in, because as we're moving forward through this canon's changing. It's getting realigned by the new players who owned and are producing things.
Yeah.
And I always think that's interesting. I look at that and I'm like, that's an interesting way to look. Because like if you tried to say that, and we've seen it with D&D, when a D&D does something in a game format and it doesn't match up with canon of the books, there's all kinds of pissed off people. Like, that is not that character. That is not what happened there. That is not the gods that would have done this.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Well, because you get, I mean, just like with any fandom, you fall in love with an idealized version of the media, as you experienced, as you headcanon it, and anytime somebody then tries to put out something else for that, if it doesn't align with those preconceived expectations you've already got of your own lived experience of this media, then you can have some hurt feelings on there.
Yeah.
I was recently watching and I swear to God this is related.
Okay.
The Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
They just recently
OLED version.
Yeah,
right?
they're putting out a new version of it that has 4K capabilities or something like that. An OLED screen, and I saw a report that, like, there were a bunch of people who were genuinely like ticked off about this, and some analysis of it basically going like, why are you angry? They're upgrading the Switch, and it's because basically people had these preconceived notions of like the next major announcement from Nintendo should be A, B, or C, and then when it wasn't,
they were disappointed.
Nintendo never promised these things.
Oh no, of course not.
People got it all blown up in their heads as Nintendo fans that they wanted this particular thing to come out, and that should be the next thing that they do. And then when it wasn't, even though nothing was ever promised, they got up in arms about it.
Well,
you see the same thing happen with major properties like Star Wars.
Oh yeah,
where you've got a bunch of people with preconceived notions about how things are, how things should be, how things should proceed. And then if they don't,
fan writing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Fan fiction.
It is fan fiction driving it, and then not fan fiction in the like standard term that's being used around the internet where someone writes something, but legitimately like four people have an argument on a Discord, which then becomes a tweet, which then becomes a story on somebody's blog, which then becomes Game Informer or Otaku's headline story about a severe argument that's happening across the internet when really it's probably like four people.
Yeah.
That now becomes a Reddit thread that's 700 pages long.
Someone tweets it and like Daisy Ridley like likes it or something like that.
Or
now
doesn't.
It's canon!
Yep, exactly. That kind of stuff. And it's funny, but it's the way it goes. Okay, so we're getting back to this. So when we talk about a Star Wars setting, one of the things that I think that this leans into, and I think that people really need to kind of attach to, is the fact that it is meant to be space opera. It is meant to be the focus on you're sympathetic with a hero-centric plot property and action, and everything has to be slightly optimistic. That's basically it. The drama wraps around your central characters with an optimistic tone. Now, it doesn't mean there's not negative drama, but the overall feel of the plot is optimism. It's hope. It's a point of light in the distance.
I mean, the only reason I'm making the stinky face right now is because my favorite movie in the entire series is Empire Strikes Back, and that is just literally 2 hours of the protagonists getting their asses kicked across the galaxy.
Finding hope. I'm with you. But it's still in the... It is still a hopeful story. It is just the dark middle.
Okay.
I mean, watch any soap opera. You know there's only 3 types of music in that. There's the discovery music, there's the shame music, and there's the, and then there's the hopeful music that is either played in one key or another. It's the same music.
Yeah. And
it's played either when someone is injured or hurt in a different key, or it is the other key of hope and what's next, Mm-hmm. That's drama. And one of the things that I love about Star Wars is regardless of the story that they tell, it's always there's a conforming establishment, there's a righteous, rebellious youth, and I'll use quotes on that.
Sure.
And there's a return to balance, and the future is always unknown.
Yeah. No, I'll do that. That is,
if you want to tell a Star Wars story, that's it, right there.
The Star Wars formula, right there.
Yep. I really, no matter where you look, that's the story. Like, oh, let's go to the past, back when it's, Knights of the Old Republic. Okay. Was there a conforming establishment? You bet there was a conforming establishment. Mm-hmm. Were the main characters righteous, rebellious youth? Pretty much, yeah. Mm-hmm. That pretty much fits everything. And then they're trying to return balance because there's something that's upset, 100%. And what happens in the future? Nobody knows, literally. Because there's just another dark edge to everything. Yep. There must always be 2, a master and an apprentice. The Sith are always waiting in the wings. There's always the darkness ready to creep in. All those things are always there. And that's what makes Star Wars Star Wars. That's what makes it different. That's why it's a fantasy, but it's a soap opera fantasy that everybody wanted. And it took off because it was needed.
Yeah.
Right at the height of some of the best soap opera writing ever.
Yeah.
So
I can see it. Do you want to talk a bit about the game mechanics? I know we talked quite a bit about the dice, but like character attributes and character creation stuff like that.
A little bit. I mean, you do have some standard attributes because you've got your brawn, your agility, your intellect, your cunning, your willpower, your presence.
I like that they have a presence stat, not a charisma stat.
Yes, because it's attractiveness and not in a physical attractiveness way of doing it.
Yeah.
It is poise. It is carry. It is
There are butt ugly
tact.
people who, when they walk into a room, people pay attention.
Correct.
And that's presence.
Yeah, that's presence. That's what it is. And I do like that. I also like that you have strain and wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And soak. And those are terms that are used in other systems very often, but the whole point of it is that it is not a standard kind of hit point system.
Yes.
In that sense.
Yes.
And I do like that a lot. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, the more I see game systems that don't use hit points, the more I like not using hit points.
Yeah.
And the strain system, I think, is something I really liked as well. Separating that from your wound points and such. Of course, you got your one of the big things about Star Wars, the Star Wars universe in general, is that you've got just countless different races that are all sapient and involved in there. So of course, there's different racial templates and stuff like that will modify your characters.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You can make yourself more wealthy. That's the thing. You can literally start wealthy. I like that system design. I've always liked that, where you can literally just spend a couple extra points and now you got more money. They went with a career tree, which I think is interesting. So you have careers that create skills and specializations, and kind of fit you along that. But it doesn't mean that you can't have specializations that cross over or skills that cross over between things. It just means that you don't automatically have those. You have to work to get those through other means. So you can't just buy another career. You actually have to buy the specialization separately. And that you have, because of that, you can use the other books and integrate specializations and such from the other books as needed. So it feels much more like a templated system, which makes it easier to get into,
mm-hmm.
but at the same time still gives you the flexibility to run away from the templates a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's nice. And then, of course, you've got advantages and disadvantages, effectively. And really, it's just disadvantages for the most part.
Yeah.
Which, again, leans into role-play your character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, that's a great thing. Obligations is a neat way of creating a system where you are compelled to do things.
Yeah,
so it adds a role playing element to that disadvantage.
Edge of the Empire added obligations.
Mm-hmm.
Age of Rebellion added duties, and for those of us who have looked into Legend of the Five Rings, duty and obligation is otherwise known as Giri and Ninjo.
Yes,
and that is your and it literally translates to duty and obligation.
Right.
It's a system lifted directly from there.
Yeah.
And it's a nice role-playing prompt beyond something like alignment or something like that, because it gives you not only a character goal, but often these things can be in conflict with one another.
Well, not only that, is it also allows the DM to set obligations on you as you start falling to the dark side or getting more dark in what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you started doing these terrible things. Now you're obligated to do stuff for the mob boss. Now you have duties to these other people that you don't want to do things for.
Yep.
And that creates a whole level of dark.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to work your way out of those, which is great. I think it's fantastic that you can spend experience to basically buy away your disadvantages because of what happens through play. Force and Destiny added morality, and
you made the kitty cat stinky face about that one.
I do not like it. I don't like it as a system. I think it's way too gray, and I think the idea of adding morality as a mechanic in a game is a bad idea.
I mean, I see where they're going with it, because the light and dark dichotomy of the Force always had a moralistic aspect to it.
Yeah.
And, doing good, selfless, generous things were considered light-sided. Doing cruel and hurtful things using the Force in a way to bring pain to other people is considered a dark sided thing. I get that, but there's been too many times where I've seen the hypothetical arguments of Luke was a dark Jedi because he blah 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 blah, and just trying to basically justify, like, paint all of his actions in the absolute worst light, and use that to justify that he inconvenienced someone at some point during the movie, therefore he's a dark Jedi.
Or just, it's okay to slaughter multiple droids, who have personalities and existences.
Yeah.
But, you barely injure R2-D2 and whoa, you've ruined a main character and that makes you dark. Like, wait a second.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I just kind of see, like, codified morality, and perhaps this is a whole future show in the making.
Yeah.
But codified morality can become a morass real quick.
Yeah. No, I think we could go far into this, and I just want to say that it's not something I don't agree with, and I've seen a lot of people who are actually discussing it in system talk about moving away from using the morality system and just using the obligation and duty system, just shifting it. So, like, I have a character in my game who's a bounty hunter, and she's doing a lot of stuff, but she's not force sensitive. But I kind of don't want to use the morality system to try and get her to pull back. And they were like, don't use obligations and duties. Switch to the other system. Just use that instead and switch up to this. And they were like, oh, well, I guess I didn't even think I could do it that way. So yeah, I'll do it that way. Because then it is still in game. It is still in system how it's being run, and the player can physically see where they're at on the scale. But it's no longer this ambiguous kind of thing, of have I done enough good, to counteract this? And now that I'm dark, is everything fueled by darkness? Do I have to lean into the darkness to do anything?
I used force lightning on some dude on the street corner, so I'm gonna donate a bunch of money and puppies to the local orphanage, and there we go. Now I'm back on the light side.
Exactly.
It makes it transactional.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say that the special thing about this system is the dice.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I flat out, that's the special.
Yeah, that's definitely the main thing that it brings to the table. I don't think it does. I mean, like, it really doesn't do anything much terribly different from other dice pool systems than that.
No.
But the dice it brings to the table adds so much cool complexity
Well,
in how to adjudicate situations.
and the way I see it is, it puts it back on the table. It puts the fate of the game and the drama of the table back on the table, or of the game back on the table versus behind the screen for the DM. Like, the DM can focus on the story, but the drama that's unfolding is happening between the players.
That's one thing. One thing I don't think I saw in the research I was doing is this one of those systems where the storyteller never touches the dice.
They don't have to.
Yeah.
There's nothing behind the screen.
Right.
So, I mean, I think there are some random rolls for, like, encounters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's arbitrary.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So yeah, I think
everything's on the table.
It was more assistive than anything else. I think everything else happens in front of the players,
Gotcha.
right between them, and I love that. I think that is fantastic.
Absolutely.
I think the disservice that it does is that it locks you into colored and specific dice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that it does. So that you can have your own Star Wars dice set, but it's got to be the right colors and the right pips.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So, and that definitely would pull away from people having custom dice that you can't see and fudging rolls.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to watch that roll. Everybody wants to watch the roll. So, Destiny tokens, great idea. They flip white to black, good and bad. They can be spent by anyone.
Othello chips.
Yeah, I love that. I think they're fantastic. So when you spend it, it just flips to black, and that's now the storyteller's side.
Yep.
And they get to spend those for different things. So I like that. I like that a lot. I've always liked the idea of being able to have drama move back and forth between the players and the storyteller.
Oh, yeah.
And be able to actively see it change in the scene.
Yep.
You know?
Yep, absolutely.
So I think that's really great. And I love that you can do dramatic editing with it. I think that's fantastic, especially because it's light. It's not directly game affecting. One of the things they talked about was like you step off the spacecraft and recognize you're in a swamp area where the air is not clean, and you're like, oh, that's a great thing that we bought those masks.
Yep.
Back at the station, y'all didn't think I should have bought those. Go shopping, and now you spend one token and you have them.
Right.
Great, fantastic, and the play moves on.
Yes.
So, yeah. Anything else? Anything you wanted to add to that?
No, not really. I really, I think you basically said it all. I really like the Destiny token systems. I like how the dice adjudicate drama in a very non-linear, non-binary way. And I would be excited to take part in a Fantasy Flight game.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely want to play in this one.
I would never want to run it.
I might be interested in running it only to give it a kick, just to see how it rolls out.
And I want to clarify, I would never want to run this not because of the system, but because it's Star Wars, and I'm not comfortable with the Star Wars universe and setting enough. Especially with the group of friends I have. I'm definitely a low person on the totem pole as far as lore mastery goes, and also just because. I don't care. I don't have the passion for it,
I mean, it's definitely not your bailiwick. I would definitely say that.
It's not my bailiwick, but like, holy cow, I love the system. So if somebody were like, hey, do you want to play? I'd be at the table in a heartbeat.
Okay. That being said, I'm gonna say that I like it. I like the cinematics of it. I love that there's a lot of give and take that happens right in front of the players. I put that out there. I think that's the overall feel that I get from this game is that it puts the narration back on the table and lets the narration happen between the players and the storyteller as an add-on, and then lets the plot be rolled out by the storyteller. They can literally just let things happen and then be like, okay, and now we're moving to here, and then now we're moving to here. So they're just setting the scene and letting the dice and the players play through it.
Yes.
And I think that's fantastic.
Yes.
Getting closer to that is the best thing you can do. And I think as game systems evolve, this definitely sits beyond, sits away from the tactical, 100%. Not that it can't be, but I think it sits away from the tactical far enough and puts it back into a narrative stance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the feel that I got from it. It was very far from tactical. It seemed very very narrative in scope.
Yeah.
It seemed almost pulpy.
Yeah,
almost pulpy, especially whenever you have the storytelling edition of the whole, like, you have villains and then you have extras, like right there you've got me. I love that. I love that pulp sort of delineation of, like, there are named characters and then there is everybody else.
Yeah.
And this is a story about named characters.
Yeah. And that's definitely a thing. I would definitely say that.
I said I don't care about Star Wars, and like the Discord erupted. It was like several people are typing.
There's definite feels out there.
There are.
I love Star Wars. I think it's fantastic. I wouldn't call myself a super geek in it. There are so many things I don't know about Star Wars, but I'm always interested in. I love how much has been created by it. And I love the stories that come out of it, and they are all large and hopeful and heroic. And that makes me happy.
I had a conversation with a friend and a coworker a couple of years ago, and it was I'd become self-conscious because I see a lot of people around me get very into a lot of their fandoms and stuff like that.
Yeah,
very passionate about things, and when something gets announced for that fandom, like they get really excited and posting on things and talking about it constantly. And it was so rare that I felt that kind of passion about like really any sort of fandom, and I was like, am I broken? Like, am I doing something wrong that like I don't feel this level of excitement like about anything? And she sat me down. She's like, it's just not your thing. That's all. Like, it's just not your thing. And I was like, right, but like nothing feels like my thing. And she turns to me. She goes, "Are you a Davian or a Cretan fan?" I'm like, obviously Davian. And she's like, "BattleTech is your thing." I'm like, oh, okay, that puts it in perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I just had to acknowledge a while ago that Star Wars was just not my thing, and but it's a lot of other people's things, and I like the enthusiasm. Sometimes it's nice to kind of sit and bask in it.
Yeah.
So
final thoughts.
I mean, definitely be prepared to roll up your sleeves if you intend to delve into this game.
I would agree.
It's not really for the faint of heart to be engaged with.
No.
The dice system is complex, but I think very rewarding to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
It's gonna take you a little time and a little bit of investment. This isn't Savage Worlds where it's like you roll the die, it says on your sheet. Oh, and if you're a wild card, add a d6.
Yeah.
You just learned 50% of the rule. No, it's not that.
No.
But I think if you're a fan of Star Wars, or if you're a fan of like narrative play and stuff like that with really good systems like that, or if you're a fan of both, give it a look, pick it up. There's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, I will say, just in my first glance and feel on this, I would say, be aware that the fan base is big and somewhat daunting. I mean, there are people who have very strong beliefs on what is canon and what is not.
Yeah.
I remember you talking about wanting to run a Tron-like game. And your immediate concern was you don't have enough technical knowledge.
I am the low person on the totem pole for computers as well.
Right. And I think the same goes for like trying to do hacking in Shadowrun and things like that, because again, it's like you're sitting down and trying to run a pandemic story, except 4 of your players at the table are biological science majors with specializations in infectious disease.
Yeah.
And so now the least amount of them at the table.
The disease spreads like this. Like that's not how any of that works.
So I would say that, if you're going to step into that, both as a player or as a storyteller, be aware.
Yeah.
And be kind.
Yeah, definitely.
People are telling a story. I mean,
just lean into it.
Yeah.
Just lean into it.
Lean into it, let it go, let things slide a little bit, maybe help them out a little on the side, or just accept that that's different wherever that stuff is going on. Things change, time changes, locations change things, So
Knox says that's a very diplomatic way of saying the fandom is toxic, and I don't think
they're toxic at all.
I don't think the fandom is toxic. I mean, like with really any community, and I've seen this all over the place for like various video games and such like that. You're gonna run into your toxic gatekeepers. Some communities are better about it than others, but ultimately, I don't think it's fair to label any whole community as toxic. The problem is that I think it's easy to stray into toxicity when you become passionate about something.
100%.
Because when you're passionate about something, and then something does not, meet your passionate expectations, it's very easy to not shrug that off and say that's just this other person's interpretation, but rather to say you're hurting the thing I love.
That's it right there.
And if you can be mature enough to sit down at the table and just say, this is a Star Wars story. It is your Star Wars story. It's our Star Wars story. And it doesn't have to be George Lucas's Star Wars story or Disney's Star Wars story. Those things don't have to match up. This can just be fun.
Yeah.
Then, I think you avoid all the toxicity right there.
Yeah, and I think that the whole concept of actor toxicity that's happened is not a problem of Star Wars. I think that's a much larger problem. The MCU had it. The Star Wars has it. Anything that has a large enough fan base that has passionate individuals involved in it is going to have it.
Yeah, like I said about the Nintendo Switch thing earlier. People shouting at Nintendo because they didn't release a new game when they never said they were going to release a new game. They upgraded their console and people were angry.
I'm straight up going to just say that there's a reason why Sonic the Hedgehog got changed in the movie.
Yeah.
And that was because people griped about it, because it was not...
People griped and bullied, yeah.
Yeah, and they got what they wanted, and that went ahead and... give me a second, I'll take care of that. And that changed the movie, which then allowed them to have power.
Yeah.
Have the commons have power, and now that the commoners have power, they get a little power hungry. And so we're seeing that more and more.
Right.
But we got good questions. I want to get to questions.
Yeah, definitely want to get to questions. So, I'll just say on the toxicity end, you're always going to run into toxic people. It's probably a lot more toxic out there, just like in the open Star Wars forums, discussing it with randos on the internet via Twitter. But like, if it's you and your friends at the gaming table, you have that assumption of friendship. Yep. And if somebody does start getting a little toxic, just
check them.
Just check them.
Just check them.
Just say, look, buddy, it's a role-playing game. Relax. And go from there.
Yeah. So, Overwatch. Star Wars has every trope imaginable, from smugglers, gunslingers, and crime lords to wizards, dragons, and magic swords. And, of course, sci-fi staples of robots, ray guns, and rocket ships. Ha, sci-fi. Does a hodgepodge like this make world building and storytelling easier or harder, and why?
So if you'd have asked me before I played the D20 version of this,
sure,
before college, I'd have told you harder, because there's so much stuff going on. How do you keep track of it all?
Mm-hmm.
I had a long talk with a friend in one of my college classes. But he was the ravenous Star Wars fan, knew every last little bit of lore, and I kind of got into a why do you like this so much sort of discussion with him, and he kind of laid it all out for me, and then I just realized it's just D&D in space. You have evil wizards who kidnap princesses and take them back to their dark fortress. Behind their legion of evil minions, and the hero wizard and his wizard's apprentice need to take their magic sword and hire a smuggler to get them into the evil fortress to rescue the princess. Did I just describe a D&D game, or did I just describe the first Star Wars movie?
That's a good question.
Exactly. It could be either. So honestly, the portability of tropes, when you've got such a broad range of things available to you in the Star Wars universe as canon, you can. I think The Mandalorian for me was probably the biggest example of the portability of tropes. Yes. Because the Star Wars movie have a certain brand to them of high adventure, and then The Mandalorian was just like, oh, and by the way, we can do spaghetti western as well.
Yes.
And it works so wonderfully, and I love it. It's my favorite Star Wars property. And I'm not, like I said, not a huge Star Wars fan.
No.
Mandalorian, mwah, chef kiss. And it's because it was a spaghetti western. And it worked so beautifully.
It really did.
So that's my answer. Easier because of portability of tropes.
I would have said before, like you, because I started with Rifts, which effectively has all of that.
Sure.
100%, like everything that was stated here is in Rifts.
Absolutely.
And I will say that running Rifts was a challenge and a half, because everybody wanted to be something completely different. Like, I want to
Glitter
be
boy.
this. I want to be this from over here, and I want to be this from over here. And as a storyteller, trying to say, how do I fit all these people together?
Right.
That was always running in my head is,
Yeah.
how do these people fit together?
Mm-hmm.
Because all these people want to be whatever they want to be, and I have to accept that
Mm-hmm.
in my story. Now, as a storyteller, I can say, this is the story I'm telling. Your character has to be part of this. You have to explain how you are all together.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, or I'm going to throw you in a situation where you guys are going to have to work together, and then you're going to have to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where things really start to get gray, because the one thing that Star Wars lacks is a consistency other than Empire, Resistance, and basically the Underworld. Those are your 3 layers. Now, you could throw in there the Force with the Jedi and the Sith as a whole different thing, but I don't necessarily feel that either of those players are their own group.
Mm-hmm.
They are above and beyond. They are separate Venn circles in this diagram.
Yeah, yeah.
But realistically, you're in one of those 3 circles. You know, are you Resistance and part of the Underworld? So you kind of cross those 2 circles and kind of puts you in a sliver in between those. So you're Han Solo-ish.
Yeah.
You know, where you run stuff for the Resistance, but you really work in the Underworld all the time. You know,
Are you Underworld and a toady for the establishment?
right?
Yeah.
You know, and that's all of these kind of sit within those circles. And because of that, you really don't have a well-defined way of breaking up people other than to say your party is going to be made up of Resistance members or Resistance-friendly group. Boom.
Yeah.
Pick your players. So now you can define it down a little bit, but other than that, it can feel very daunting
Mm-hmm.
to try and figure out how to think. So when they broke up the system into the 3 books, they helped define that.
Yes.
And I
yes.
think that's really
We're
where...
playing Edge of Empire. This is a smuggler story. Like, this
There
is
you
an
go.
Underworld story.
Yep.
you
And
know?
then you can describe the feel.
Yeah.
You know, this is a heist story. Or this is a running from the law story. Or this is the get the man story, you know, or get the money story. You know, those kinds of things where you can start, or we're protecting this town story. This is our, Seven Samurai story, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's where things can start making the changes. And I think it makes it harder to be able to narrow those people down, but I think the way they built the system, they made it easier. They definitely took the burden off of the storyteller a little bit in trying to pull the group together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Next question?
yeah, go for it.
All right, so Knox in the Box asks, and this kind of ties into Overwatches. In my admittedly narrow research of this game, I kept seeing it described as lightweight. However, I can't help but notice the massive amount of rule and source books associated with it, perhaps from all the new systems it introduces. Do you think games like this suffer from being too extra with features, overstacking, and layering like this? It seems like the opposite of lightweight to me. So this isn't a Star Wars problem. This is a role-playing games in general issue. And that is that once you put out your core rules, people want to know more about the universe. They want to know more about the systems. They want to know, okay, so you didn't include, seafaring, ship rules in your things. Well, okay, let's put out a whole pirate expansion for ships and stuff like that.
What about Naboo? Can we see more about Naboo?
Yeah, exactly.
What about the Trade Federation? Like, tell us more about the Trade Federation.
There aren't stats for this particular ship in the core rulebook. Okay, well, let's put out a expansion book for everything that appears in this movie.
Exactly.
This is the Empire Strikes Back core rulebook.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
you get to see all those, ships and stuff like that they were evacuating off of Hoth.
Right.
So you run into this problem kind of all over the place. But I don't know if it's a problem, really. It's... On one hand, I understand where it looks daunting from the outside perspective that you have on game systems in general, Star Wars included.
Yep.
It can be very daunting when, you look up on D&D Beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And
very
you
much
see
so.
that there are just a 2-page list of source books for 5th edition, and you're like, what do I need
Where
here?
do you start?
The core rulebook. That's it. Everything else is peripheral.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is expansion rules to be added or disregarded as is applicable. And if you've got players at your table going, well, actually, on this extra source book, page 147, it says, well, you're like, I'm not using the source book.
Yeah.
End of discussion.
Yeah,
like,
that's it.
Right there. We're not using that source book, so what else you got?
Exactly.
So, yeah, it looks daunting, but it's daunting in the same way that, if you don't have the expansion, store-bought's fine, It's not a huge deal if you don't have all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I could have said the same thing when I got into D&D 2nd edition.
Oh, yeah.
And you had all of the, Rangers compendium and every class had a book.
Mm-hmm.
A full book of new stuff. And, there were cool books, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the 2nd edition books immensely. But at the same time, it just felt like they were never ending. It was like, holy God, I'm going to be collecting books to the end of time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It's just expensive.
The easy solution is don't.
Yeah.
So, all right. The last question here we've got is from the Mad Elf. Asks, how would you put together a game without Jedi/Sith or any other significant use of the Force? Easily, it's called The Mandalorian.
Well, I mean, yes and no.
Well, okay,
there were plot devices.
There is the child.
But the thing is that was the fantifical. That was the one thing that was fantifical in that story. But I agree. I 100% agree that the Mandalorian. The other element that you could say is Rogue One.
Yeah, Rogue One. Rogue One really didn't have any Force use.
It had a quote-unquote Force-sensitive person, but that's kind of questionable. He was just a badass who was blind.
Yeah, he was a badass who was blind and pretty lucky.
Yeah, exceptionally lucky.
And had extraordinary faith.
Yeah.
And until that faith ran out, or until that luck ran out, and he had a heroic ending, but
he had to push himself at the very end to achieve his goals.
Yeah.
And I mean, those kinds of stories can exist very easily in a world where magic exists. You can have D&D games where nobody uses magic, where magic is this ominous thing.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, in my opinion, I almost think that that's I say better story. I don't know if it would be quantifiably better, but it would be a story I would like to tell.
I have sincerely thought about running a D&D game where magic is not the norm.
Oh, I'm not even talking about D&D.
Yeah.
I'm literally talking about Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
Where literally, no Force, no Jedi.
No.
Period. We're just going with everything else. Yeah, it's just a myth. Very much like the setting in The Mandalorian, where think of The Mandalorian without the child.
Yeah.
Then the Force literally doesn't figure into it.
Yeah, he's running around with a lampshade.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's now a sexy lamp.
Yes. The leg lamp from
the leg lamp from Christmas Story.
Yeah, he's running around with that, and everybody wants it.
Yes, exactly. But to me, I always the one annoyance I always had with Star Wars was that I felt like there was so much potential to tell cool stories about cool people doing cool things.
Mm-hmm.
But it always got muddled up because a Jedi shows up, and then everything it becomes the Jedi show.
Yes.
And I kind of get that. The core movies are about essentially the Skywalker family and their family drama destroying the universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of get it, but then you get ancillary stories of this doesn't involve the Skywalkers at all. This is happening on some other planet, and there's a Jedi. It's oh, come on, guys.
Can we not?
Every Star Wars story have to involve? So just out of rebellion. Out of the sheer spirit of FU.
I love that you use that.
Yeah. Yeah. Out of the sheer spirit of rebellion, I wanted to run a Star Wars story that just has no Force in it whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a myth or a rumor or however else you want to feel your character feels about it, but no Force-sensitive characters whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. I did read about one person who ran a game on a planet that was Force devoid.
Oh, okay.
Where literally anybody the players who came on there could not feel the Force that had been basically taken, and didn't explain why. Didn't have anything, but basically it was a Force devoid planet, and that was it. It regardless if you were Sith or Jedi, light or dark, didn't matter.
You were a dude.
You were just a dude with a lightsaber,
Yep.
which still made you a huge, cantankerous badass, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of feels empty there.
Grats on your laser sword.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, still cool. Don't get me wrong.
Try blocking blaster bolts, though.
I mean, you can do it. You just got to be real crafty.
Yeah, maybe.
So, yeah. So next week, when we're going to move on... Yeah, give it a second. We're going to be moving on from this and moving into plot hooks and breadcrumbing. And that's where, they're terms that are used a lot in talking about narration and writing stories and getting things in. Sometimes they're referred to as either hooks or linchpins, and how do you use those?
Yeah, basically, how do you put strings on your players and get them to dance like the puppet master that you are, but without railroading them and saying you have to go here and have to do this? So you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We broadcast on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave, and join us up on the Discord. You can find the link to our Discord up on our Twitter, as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com. We'd love to hear from you. Give us some show questions and join the discussion.
We also would like to thank our named Patreon members, Knox in the Box, Sam, The Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion, Vedran, and Hulavu. We really appreciate all the help you do month to month that keeps this show going and clearly keeps the generator running. Our pre-show music today was by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/Arcane Anthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find them at freemusicarchive.org.
And as always, a big shout out to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who sat with us over at our tables over the years to give us all this experience to share with you. The makers of the generator who made this made this show possible, and you, every single one of our listeners. We love you so much.
Good night.
Good night.